I'm Nisha Parker-Gibson, and this video is about finding resources in our libraries, which are also your libraries. So looking for support materials for your papers, your presentations, your lit reviews, your theses, and so on. This isn't going to be everything that you could possibly need to know, but I'm hoping it will give you a foothold. Among the resources that we're might be looking for would be articles, books, or book chapters, conference proceedings, and so on. I'm going to focus particularly on databases that show us where the articles are, because that is one of the things that people ask me for the most. But keep in mind that some of these other resources may be very important to you. Particularly if you're writing a thesis or a dissertation, it pays off to look for theses and dissertations that would relate for all kinds of reasons, but not the least of which is to make sure that you're not replicating entirely somebody else's finished product. So the databases help us find the literature in a particular field or discipline. They are built for the job of looking at the literature. They are more likely to interact with our online resources so that you can get to the full text more readily. There's almost always more comprehensive coverage. Some of it goes back 100 years. And there are other reasons to use the databases. I also use Google Scholar. I sometimes use Google Scholar by itself. I usually use them in tandem. I have another presentation or another guide that's linked at the bottom there that talks about how to make Google Scholar perform better for you. But for today, we're talking about the databases in particular, because that's where a lot of this stuff lives. I do suggest to folks that they keep a research diary or notebook or log, whatever you want to call it, of their searches as they go, so that you write down the date, you write down where you're searching, you write down the terms you used, how you chose them, whether you limited by date, whether you limited it to English language only, to particular authors, to particular journals, and so on. All these things can be important, and especially if you want to be able to replicate your searches over time, then you need to know all of those things. Another thing that's helpful is to check in the databases for what's called controlled vocabulary, such as subject headings, also known as descriptors. In Medline, they're called mesh, or other kinds of terms that gather the information on a topic together so that you can search. At times, you can search with one good controlled vocabulary term and get effectively a comprehensive search for that particular topic. That's why I like controlled vocabulary. So the reasons to keep track of your searches, obviously, logically, to track what's working so that you can do more of the same, or you can modify things over time to make things more precise. You can also track your searches, should track your searches if you're creating a specific literature review, because especially for the higher end ones, like a systematic review, part of reporting on your systematic review is telling us where you searched and how. And it ought to be more than just Google Scholar, by the way. It's also possible to replicate your searches over time and see what else you can find. So all of those things are important. The other thing, and this is something I don't always emphasize, but part of training yourself to do this well is keeping track of what your practice is. Also, what isn't working. It's not a bad idea to write down what isn't working, because if you search several days in a row and you set it aside because it just wasn't working, when you come back, you may or may not remember exactly what you were doing, because we all have very busy lives and there's a lot going on. So I like to track it for that reason. You can be more effective and you can be more efficient. No database has everything in it. Web of Science is quite broad and somewhat deep, but it only covers what they think of as the top journals in a field, so it may not cover everything. Uh, I love it as a database, but it has some very interesting features, but I don't think it's the only place to go by any manner of means. Um, Agricola works well specifically for material from the US and from the USDA. CAB Abstracts indexes internationally and goes back to 1910, so they cover a world of stuff, literally, and often will give you something that other places won't. And GeoRef is a good choice if you're looking at GIS or watershed or environmental materials or pollution, all those things. SciFinder is another one that I added in here because it does cross disciplinary boundaries, because it's made up of chemical abstracts plus Medline plus some indexing for other journals plus patents plus you can draw structures plus you can find out where to buy materials, chemical materials. So there's a lot of funding opportunities you can often see in there, find out who funded what. So there's a lot of different things where SciFinder is useful, but it works somewhat differently from everybody else. So I tend to set it into its own place. I do have a guide for it as well. That's another one of our research guides, and the link is down there at the foot. Something to keep in mind is you may have to jump disciplinary boundaries, because agricultural education is a huge example of the fact that a lot of people who are interested in agricultural education publish in journals that are indexed in other databases like ERIC, because ERIC does a deep dive into education journals. Or likewise, hospitality, we can use the hospitality and tourism index, but it also shows up in business databases, and human development can be all over the place. So PsycInfo has something for you potentially, or Medline, or CINAHL, which is the nursing database, but also covers allied health literature. So there's lots of possibilities, and my main goal here is to get you to think about the idea that there isn't any one of these that's the only place to look, usually. Also, if you want to take a big swing at something, we have what's called a federated search, but who would know what that meant? What it is, it's a whole stack of multiple databases that you can search all at the same time, and you can limit it to specific kinds of materials and get a lot of stuff in a very quick fashion, which is one reason why it's called quick search. But the other thing to keep in mind too is that you can use this advanced search function to make it much more precise, and I'll show you just one example of that. I was using the advanced search the other day to try and find something that I looked at a long time ago that was about the value of diversity in economic situations, like in business situations. What value does diversity have? And I remembered that the Harvard Business Review has a number of pieces on that. So I did this search first. The search in the top box, you still get thousands or even a million records if you do this search by itself. But if you limit to Harvard Business Review, you get a much smaller, more precise set looking at the business field, logically enough. And I did find the one I was looking for in particular, along with a handful of others. So there's lots of ways to finesse a search, and this is just one example of how to do it. When you look at the records in Quick Search, you'll see a couple of things. You'll see an example where, let's see, get this thing. See, it says citation online. That means that the record is there, the citation is there, but the full text is not attached to it. So when you click through on that link, it would ask you if you wanted to use interlibrary loan. And I would encourage you to register for interlibrary loan as soon as you get to campus, if you haven't already. The second one, where this link says full text online, if you would click through on that, it would offer you the full text of the article. Usually it jumps to the journal. Sometimes it jumps to the specific article. If it jumps to the journal, you may have to cut and paste the title and put it in to get to it. But one way or another, it should get you to or close to the full text. So that's how that works. It actually works very similarly in the other databases. So if it just says the citations online, that's one thing. If it says the full text online, you should be able to click through a step or two to get it. And take that off again, just to tidy up. So you've seen that I've been using ands, ors, and sometimes nots. I don't use nots very often, but they are possible to use. It does work better in most of the databases if you capitalize them so that the software will recognize them as what they are. It helps if you put your important words early in the search. I also use a parenthesis and then the common name or the scientific name and close the paren, because how it's rendered can vary between the databases depending on what you're looking for. And I do the same thing actually with acronyms and the full name of organizations. So say the acronym for a campus and then the word or capitalized and the full name of the organization with a closed paren so that you get both variations. That'll give it to you more comprehensively. And tends to focus a search. In, for example, Google Scholar, things are anded automatically unless you insert an or, and it has to be capitalized, and brings things together. It says, yes, bring me this and this for certain. The asterisks that you see at the end of those words is a way of making things bigger, and I'll show you that here in a second. So this gives us a different examples with the ors, and then also soy is one of those weird ones that you can play with and see what you get with the truncation symbol, because especially in something like CAB abstracts, which is international, you may want to use both soybean and soyabeans, or soybean or soyabeans, because of the fact that it's rendered as soyabeans in some cases. But the asterisk is a truncation symbol, and usually what that means is when you put in the stem of the word and the asterisk, you'll get the stem of the word with its various possible endings. So you can see some of these variations. Keyword searches often work as well as anything, but I almost always also look to see if there are subject terms that I can use that might work better. Almost all of the databases have controlled vocabularies. If they do, there's a thesaurus or what they'll call a subject list or descriptors list, or they'll call it something that sounds sort of like that, and it'll be somewhere where you can find it. Now, authors' names, there's usually an author index as well. This particular example is from Web of Science, and what you'll see here is that Dr. Moldenauer, who's down at the Rice Station, has a bunch of different ways her name has been represented over time, because people's names change, or how they write them change, how they record them changes, and also Well, just the rules for a different citation style or from a different journal can make a difference. So if you were trying to find everything by her in this database, you could click all those different checkboxes and catch them, or in this case, you could also click on this link and get them all. So that's something to keep in mind. Not all of them look exactly like this, but Web of Science actually does a really good job of rendering different names, but it usually can be found in any of the databases. Now, orchids. There are identifiers. Orchid is one. There's researcher IDs. Different profile accounts will give you an identification number. I like ORCID because it's free and because it's international in scope. So orcid.org is where you can go and make a profile and tuck in your various publications as you put them in, as you have things published, or if you have a poster, or if you have a conference presentation, whatever. And what that does is tie your work to your particular name. Now, why that's important is that a lot of people have very similar names, and sometimes people not only have a similar last name, they might have the similar initials. They might have the identical first name and middle initial. So you want your work to be associated with the person that is you. The other thing is that people's names can change for all kinds of reasons. One of them, the classic one, being somebody gets married, somebody gets divorced. There's lots of different reasons why somebody's name might change, but you want your authorship to have continuity. So that's an important and useful thing to have. So I recommend to everybody that they build themselves an ORCID profile. Now, if you have questions, please do get in touch. I am working from home, as you can probably tell. If you email me first, then we can make an appointment to talk. I'm working on a way to have it linked in my LibGuides, my research guides, that you can click through and chat with me through Teams or through Zoom, but that's still a work in progress. So email me, we'll make an appointment, we'll go on from there. Let me know what you need, and thank you for listening.